Hey, hey.
Hey, hey. Unreported
Man.
8.
Here it is.
Yep.
Here it is. This is the show when we make sure to get canceled.
Mm-hmm. This is the only show that we really can be canceled.
We're gonna get it done tonight.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Tired of messing around with these censors. Let's get it done and enter the Hall of Fame of the censored, of the silenced.
The biggest award in journalism is being murdered by the FBI. And then the second highest award is what Alex Jones got, is being deplatformed from everything all at once on the same day.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Let's do that. I think that's good. Yeah, I mean, I want to live an honorable life, and that's the way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They'll make us martyrs, just like they always do. The thing about the news, though, is like I'm still reeling from the Nancy Pelosi story. And then, once we get our hot take out, then I listen to everybody else's hot takes. And then I start to make sense of it. But then the next crazy thing happens and we have to move on. And we're in a constant state of just heightened red alert all the time. And we can never really process anything.
Welcome to the American political mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way Americans think about stuff regarding politics. Here today, gone tomorrow. Mm-hmm. We have notoriously bad short-term memory as a culture, as a people, and especially when it comes to politics. I mean, Americans, as I've said many times, are profoundly ignorant about politics in general. And so I think that's part of the reason they just flit from one idea, one issue to the next, often just forgetting. I mean, this is kind of like, could the left really hang together if people did have short-term memory or medium-term memory? Because, yesterday Russia ran the country and now we just forgot about that. Climate change, that requires constant memory loss, of all the predictions of catastrophe that have been made and then didn't come true. And, it goes on and on. I mean, and then the rapes on campuses, stop talking about that. No one remembers that. That was the greatest crisis we faced as a nation, and no one talks about it. So being a leftist, and we can talk about what being a rightist means too. There's a lot of things that means too, but being a leftist clearly requires amnesia.
At least supporting the Democratic Party. If I try to red pill anybody, I tell them to take whatever issue it is you care about and actually try to accomplish something on that issue over a sustained period of time. And then it'll engage their long-term memory. And then they'll see, wait a minute, I believe in Black Lives Matter, but this month Black lives don't matter anymore. We're on to something else. And then they'll see that they're being used and they'll see the narrative constantly change. And then that's the best way I've found to get people to think differently.
This is why I became a historian, because I realized that cultural memory, I guess, which is what history is the surest way to have a sophisticated and powerful argument about contemporary politics. And it's also the best way to win political arguments, I have found. It can be often annoying for my opponents or opponents of historians, but boy, if you know the history of an issue, you are so far ahead of the game, and it's very hard to defeat that. No matter what your position is, no matter what you're arguing, if you know the history of it, you can't really be beat. So Americans listening, watching, please read a little bit, read a little bit, and try to understand. When I was in college, I would read the New York Times and I'd read just a news story, and I didn't know anything, of course, because I was in college. I was a kid, and I would just, whenever he would mention something, some fact, I would look it up. Back then it was in the encyclopedia. This was before the internet, but I would look up the fact that they mentioned, and I'd have to know, oh, so this is the history of the thing they're writing about. And that's how you learn. You have to learn the history of now to understand now. And especially when it comes to politics, you've got to know that the Ukraine crisis did not start in February. You got to know that it started not even in 2014. Really, it started in 2008, but you can make an argument that it started long before that too. You can always go back farther. Sure. Yeah, the 90s, 89. Yeah, right. 89 and 91. And even before that, I mean, World War I is really the origin of the Ukraine crisis, and World War II as well. I mean, the whole 20th century. So anyway, and you're going to win. You're going to win. So everyone learn history and take our courses on history, most importantly.
It's not that much. There's that Joe Rogan joke that people talk about, the long storied institutions of the United States and American history as this grand tradition when it's 1776. People live to be 100 years old. 1776 is 3 people ago. It's not that much.
Oh, no. That's the other thing. We have a huge advantage. I mean, I was just listening to somebody, I think it was the Duran or somebody like that, talk about European history, and they were referencing things that happened 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, as being directly relevant to contemporary politics. I mean, they were talking about old kings way back in the day, and I was thinking, God, how exhausting.
Yeah.
To be good historically and politically in the ways I'm talking about in Europe requires a whole lot of knowledge, but here, just a few hundred years, big deal. You can learn that stuff. My advisor in graduate school at Columbia, Alan Brinkley, he said that. He said, you can get up to speed on American history pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Which is true. It's true. It's not that it's a very young nation, although it's a very big nation and a very complicated culture. So there is a lot to study there, but at least the time span is pretty limited.
Yeah. Culturally, anywhere in the New World, you got to pretty much know the entire world to know.
Yeah.
Anywhere in the New World. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. What's on the docket?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, everybody knows what happened. I think the FBI raided Trump's residence in Mar-a-Lago. As much as I wish I had like footage of FBI agents kicking down the door and running past Barron Trump in his bedroom, what I do have is Karine from the White House press conference. Yeah.
Oh, my girlfriend.
Your girlfriend.
You mean my girlfriend?
Yeah.
That's her name.
And this is her response when she was asked, "Hey, did Merrick Garland sign off on this? Where did this come from? Where's the warrant for this? Where did this come from?"
And has the White House been told whether or not Attorney General Garland signed off on the search warrant himself?
We learned about this. The president learned about this just like you all did through the public reports. And we learned about this just like the American people did.
So you don't know whether or not Garland signed off on it?
I don't have anything more to share. So like I said, we did not know about this, and we have not been briefed on this. We learned about this just like the public, just as you all were reporting it through the public reports.
And on
Oh, poor thing. She's so cute though. I just can't stand it. I mean, I'm going to rescue her eventually. She'll find out. Yeah. So Garland today though stated directly that he authorized it personally.
Yeah, they did your girl dirty. They should have told her like ahead of time.
Well, this administration is not known for its competence. And so it's not terribly surprising, I should say. This is another thing we need to always keep in mind. And my friend Camille Foster is always reminding me of this. When you go down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, and by the way, many conspiracy theories have been proven right, you have to always remember that these people are not the Wizard of Oz. They are quite incompetent in general. And when you think about it, that makes sense, because if you're very talented in this culture and you're interested in having a good life, why on earth would you choose politics? You can make a lot more money and not have half the country hate your guts all day long, every day, by, going into business. So, or something, many other things. And so we don't get the most talented people in politics. And I think that's what we're seeing now. Although it's gotten a lot worse. And that's something that I still haven't seen a good answer for. Why the political class, and we talked about this, I think, last week, why the political class has declined so much in quality, just in intellectual quality. I mean, everybody hates Richard Nixon, but he was way smarter than these people and much more competent and understood politics and knew the issues much better than these people. I don't know. Why is the White House press secretary an absolute airhead? I mean, she doesn't know anything. She has to look at the folder, the binder, for every question, and she's just literally reading. I mean, Psaki did it too. Jen Psaki. Someone would ask her a question, and then she would just immediately go to the binder and flip to that page with that issue, I guess, written down, and she started reading from prepared notes. I mean, how is that okay? I mean, this is seriously a country on the decline if that's going on. Not to mention, we got to talk about this, man. This is totally off topic. But you know, it civil war. Are we headed for a civil war in this country? So listen. So
Yeah.
sure, it certainly, you can make a very persuasive argument that we're headed for civil war. There's lots of factors that are lining up that would make anybody nervous about a potential civil war. But you know what? Most Americans can't get off their couch. I mean, if you have, what is it, 50 to 60% obesity rates among adults, who exactly is going to fight in the civil war? What are they going to do? Waddle around with guns? You know, you got to be somewhat in shape to fight. So, and I think if the Chinese ever get their act together and invade us, it'll be interesting because Americans will have all the guns, but they won't be able to stand up. To shoot.
When we've seen public street violence or political confrontations, what it really is, like in the last 5 years, like Tim Pool has documented this, that there seems to be like an escalating thing happening, especially when Antifa was out on the streets a lot. But the BLM riots aside, when you see political confrontation, it's basically a Facebook post in real life. It's very performative. Yeah. There's no actual battle happening. It's just a bunch of people yelling and screaming and taking the online world into the real world. And I saw that when a caravan of trucks came by to Mar-a-Lago to support Trump after he got raided. I was like, oh shit, like the Republicans with the guns, are they going to duke it out with the FBI? No, they were just having megaphones out and just blasting music, and somebody paid for a plane to fly above them that said ha ha ha. It's just all bitching back and forth.
I don't know if I've ever met anybody who was a Democratic Party or Republican Party activist, someone who actually worked for the party. You know, I don't know anybody except for journalists who have gone to the conventions. This is something, again, we have to keep in mind. Not only are Americans fat, they're not involved in politics, which is a good thing mostly, but it can also be a bad thing. So everyone needs to keep in mind this number, which is 100 million. That is the number of people who don't vote. 100 million. That number stays pretty constant over the last decade or two. 100 million in a country of 350 million. So we are talking. So guess what, everyone? If you didn't vote like me, we are in the majority. We're the biggest. We're the biggest group, at least. Not the majority, but we're the biggest group are the non-voters. 75 million voted for Trump. 80 whatever voted for Biden, something like that. Yeah, so we're way bigger than those two parties. And we don't care. We don't care about politics. Americans do. Yeah. The number of people who have ever showed up to a political protest, I mean, it's tiny. The number of people who are on Twitter is not big. It's not big. Everyone's on Facebook and Instagram. It's a very small number of people on Twitter. The number of people who read the newspaper cover to cover every day, which is what you really have to do to stay on top of politics, it's tiny. People don't participate, which is mostly good, because when Americans do participate, it's a shit show because they tend to be so ignorant. But it's also a bad thing because they're very easily manipulated. You get on TV and tell them to be scared about something, they're going to be scared because they don't know any better, because they don't read or watch or listen. And that's something you've got to always keep up. So what I've said about American politics, sorry to cut you off, is that American politics is a tiny number of people performing on a very small stage. It's a tiny little stage, but that everybody else is watching. So it's a tiny stage with a giant audience, 300 plus million people all watching this stage. And then just a tiny number of people get up on that stage and they fight and they perform and they act and they do stuff and they talk and they yell. And maybe they go to prison. Maybe they win an election. Maybe they get their house raided by the FBI. But it's this teeny little minority of people who are actually doing politics in this country. And the vast, vast majority, and I mean more than 90%, know nothing about it except that it's happening. That's really remarkable, because what we have is a superpower, a global empire that's also a superpower that runs the world and has for close to a century. Yet most of its people don't even know where Ukraine is. most people, the vast majority of people, don't know anything about NATO or Article 5 or really anything concerning politics. And so it becomes like a zombie culture, a zombie political culture, which just keeps moving forward with this tiny little political class driving it, driving the vehicle. And they're basically on their own and autonomous. Every once in a while, there's some sort of little upsurge of a rebellion, like now it's MAGA, but even MAGA, it's the biggest political movement, dissident movement we've had since God knows when. I don't even know. It might be the biggest in American history in terms of numbers.
Dude.
But even that, like how...
What's that? They got a president elected, so like that's huge.
Yeah, but I mean, like, yes, but how many people are actually active MAGA people, right? I mean, how many is that? And I gotta think it's a tiny minority. People who really like watch the War Room. I guess we have the numbers on that, we know, but it's it's in the millions, but it's not going to be, I don't know, it's not in the tens of millions, I don't think. So again, in a country of 350 million, we're talking about a very small portion of the population that does things, that determines politics. It's really something, and it's quite scary when you think about the fact that we have intercontinental ballistic missiles tipped with nuclear warheads. And that very few people even know about that. So anyway,
man, okay,
that's my black pill moment.
All right, there's a lot of threads I could go on there. You were talking earlier about the incompetence. Why are they so incompetent? It's affirmative action is a big part of it, but yeah, it's not a woman thing, because Angela McArdle of the Libertarians, Mises Caucus, incredibly talented woman organizing for the Libertarian Party. Kellyanne Conway, everything she did for Trump. Kayleigh McEnany. Like, it seems like every party has talented women in it, except for the Democratic Party. I love to say that. But when you value womanhood as a virtue and you give people positions for that, you get people who are unprepared, who haven't been challenged, who don't have to, be adversarial, who don't face the fire, and they are just completely unprepared.
Yeah. Friend of the show, Geoff Shullenberger, brilliant guy. Everyone should check him out. He's Daily Barbarian on Twitter, and his podcast is called Outsider Theory, and he is just about the smartest person, I think, on the left these days. But his podcast recently was about museums, of all things, and how, I didn't know this, but museums are just being run into the ground these days. I mean, they're losing customers, audience, patronage, whatever they call it. Their shows are less and less and less about art and about their own collections and about what the museums are about. And they're much more about how good the cafe is and the view of the downtown and how cool the building is and which architect, designed the building. But he showed in this podcast that what we've had in the museum world, but this is really in all sorts of sectors of society right now, we've had affirmative action on a grand scale going on. So especially since George Floyd, especially since the summer of 2020, every cultural institution, every political institution, every university has just ramped up to the nth degree their diversity initiatives, and they have gone out of their way to hire people for top positions who are not qualified, who don't have credentials. So apparently many of the major museums in this world right now, in this country, I should say, are staffed or headed by people who have no degree in art or art history.
Yes.
But guess what color they are, and guess what politics they have.
Well, or they have degrees in, like, African American history, or
exactly,
being a critical theorist in and of itself is enough to qualify you for any job.
Exactly. Yeah, and so this is why this is one of the reasons, and this is kind of what you pointed to, one of the reasons why Netflix shows suck so badly. I mean, just in terms of entertainment. I mean, even if you love the politics that's being put forward on Netflix shows, they're just boring. They're just really not good. And, television used to be where all the good art was for about 20 years there with HBO and The Sopranos and then on forward. But in the last 5 to 10 years, since the advent of woke and since Netflix took that on, I think most people would agree that Netflix has declined precipitously in quality.
Do you know what
because of this?
Do you know what young people watch? Anime.
Do they? Yeah. I am so curious about what young people are doing these days. Yeah, I know. I don't like that at all. But I can understand it. the whole move to cartoons and comics and superheroes, and just aesthetically, and maybe even more than that, I have a problem with it. I'm now alienating half the audience now, but you know, we didn't used to do that. Adults didn't used to read young adult novels, for instance. That's a big thing now. A lot of, especially women, like Harry Potter was just the beginning of this trend. A lot of people read, a lot of adults read young adult fiction now. And this is part of, I think, this broader infantilization. Do I want to say that? Do I want to be that strong? Of the culture.
That's a trend. There's a lot there. And when you're talking about young adult fiction, when I was preparing for this show, I watched the propaganda. I watched regime propaganda. I watched the Colbert Show, the Tonight or Late Show with Colbert.
Yeah.
And everybody should keep their eyes on the propaganda, because on that show, they don't call Trump Trump. They do T******, and they do like different names that are funny joke names about him. And basically, they're calling Trump Voldemort, right? Like, saying his name gives him more power, and we can't even acknowledge him at all. Like, it's that level of just crazy ex-girlfriend pettiness, but also, yeah, infantilization, young adult fiction energy.
And you know where that started? With the words, right? I can't say the N-word without YouTube banning us, right? So I should just use the N-word instead of the word itself. This is a thing. Camille and I,
everybody think it right now. So
yeah, right. Yeah. This is a thing that Camille and I have complained about for years and years. And he had this incredible moment on Fox News where he used the word like 20 times in 5 minutes on a cable news network. And it was a huge scandal. Anyway, it was that. I mean, that began, it was right around, I mean, I used to use the word in my classrooms often because, as I've said, it is the most important word in American history. And everyone agrees with me on this, whatever your position is on race and race relations and racism, everyone agrees that race and Black people and everything related to them has been central in American politics and culture and society. Like, that's, of course, the whole damn country was basically organized around that word and its meaning. And it's in all the great literature, American literature, until very recently. And it has been used in different ways, by the way. And then it was reappropriated by Black people and it had a whole new meaning, which is also extremely important. What's a more important word in pop culture than the N-word, right? I can't think of one. You know, you're either one of them, you either use that word and you're allowed to, or you want to use that word and you're not allowed to. But it's a huge thing that organizes the way we think in America about all sorts of stuff. And it actually organizes our politics. I mean, you could get vaccines, you know, you could be first in line for the vaccine if you were of a particular race. So, but then about 10 years ago, it's roughly around 10 years ago, right, when I was starting to leave the academy, they became verboten to use the word. And that's when it became the N-word. And I thought at the time, it's like, this is treating us like children, because children are the people who get harmed by words. It's only children. To me, that defines, in a sense, a child. It's someone who is vulnerable to words, images, thoughts, feelings in a way that is so strong, so powerful that they must be protected from them. I mean, I agree with that. Almost everyone agrees with that, right? That we censor ourselves around kids all the time because we can needlessly upset them with words, and that's just being a child. And I agree with that. But once you become an adult, that's the point of being an adult, is that you can go out into the world and face what the world has to offer you without you crumbling. So there is a broader infantilization that's been going on that I find really troubling. And I'm sorry to say, because I know a lot of people who listen to the show are into this, but it's not like I'm opposed to comics and superheroes, but I guess it is a little troubling. I wish people would have somewhat more of what we used to call adult taste in culture, in addition to liking Marvel. But
okay.
I don't know. I know. I'm a
Mr.
hypocrite.
Low culture, Mr. Champion of low culture here.
Well, but it's not. No, hold on. So Renegade History is not about just low culture. It's about culture that is subversive of Puritanism in particular. And now comic book culture is partly subversive of Puritanism. And in that way, I certainly welcome it, and I'm glad it's around, challenging in various ways. I mean, sort of the sexual Puritanism. I think comic books, from what I see, I don't really watch this stuff or read it, but there's a lot of highly sexualized stuff in there that is certainly anti-puritanical, and just comics in general is about fantasy and fun, and it's not about work and family and all the things that Puritanism is about. So in that way, I find it's good. But then again, what's missing for me is emotional depth, emotional complexity, dealing with relationships, the ins and outs of relationships, which are the most nuanced and I would argue most interesting things to study and to show in media, in movies and films and books, etc. We lose a lot of that, and I think we're less adept at talking about things like that now because of this infantilization, because children don't talk about adult relationships. So I think that's what we're losing.
I agree. I know what you're saying. Marvel, that brand is definitely very infantilizing. And, a lot of comics are going woke. And the reason why I brought up anime is because it's foreign, it's Japanese. People are watching that over the comics nowadays because it's free of all the regime propaganda in it. It's a completely unique story from another culture. And a lot of times the Japanese culture romanticizes American culture. So that like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure plays classic rock music in the background. And a lot of the characters are American cowboy archetypes, Cowboy Bebop. Now, I haven't watched this stuff. I need to get into it. But all my friends are super into anime.
Really?
Everybody. Yeah. And I think it's just legitimately the best television out there. And from what they tell me, it does have incredibly complex adult relationships, themes, mature, sophisticated sci-fi themes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we should have some anime creator on the show to talk about this. I'd love to know, because I don't know. I mean, I've seen a little bit of it. I do know, I've heard at least that like anime is big as porn also.
I
know there's
hentai.
I know hentai. Hentai, yeah, I know, but like sometimes it's just called anime. But no, I saw recently, like, apparently I learned a lot of this stuff from Geo, who was on our show, Pennacchietti. He somewhere on his Twitter feed, he was talking about how every guy has a favorite anime girl.
Waifu.
Oh,
yes. Yeah.
And then I looked at it. I looked at some of the pictures of those girls, and I don't know. I guess I'm just old.
Well,
I don't get it. It's like very simple. I mean, as porn, it's not very effective to me, but I guess it is to a lot of men.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say that these characters are very, very young.
You're gonna there is that too, right? Well, that's a whole subject of like why people on the right are so concerned about pedophilia, and I think there's some good reasons for that. I think it has to do with where a lot of people on the right tend to live, and the institutions they come from, and the institutions they uphold. And I'm talking about the church and the family, which are the sites of most molestation and abuse of children. That's where most of it happens, the church and the family. And well, who stands for the church and the family? It's the right wing. People who are screaming about pedophiles. It's the people who are screaming about pedophiles right now.
Man. Okay. We keep talking about
yeah. But I mean, those anime girls, that is basically a form of pedophilia. I mean, those look like girls with big tits.
And canonically in these shows, they are 11, 14 years old, 15 years old. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The call's coming from inside the house, right wingers. Libs of TikTok woman. You should go check to see what your son and your nephew are looking at right now.
Well,
not to mention the number of guys who scream about pedophiles who just jerked off to a girl who just turned 18, which is like a huge number of porn stars just turned 18. And not to mention all the incest that goes on in porn, and all the incest is off the hook in porn. It's everywhere. It's like totally ubiquitous. There is, the schoolgirl motif is huge, and it's like there's pedophilia going on all over the place, not by pedophiles, by most people, or a lot of people in this culture, and that's not talked about. It's very strange.
Well,
why doesn't Libs of TikTok go after Pornhub? And the people who watch incest porn on Pornhub, why is that? I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of people. Why is that not a problem, Libs of TikTok?
Mhm.
Yeah, I threw down.
Damn. Okay, man, I want to stay on the
Bring
FBI. I want to stay on the FBI. Well, okay. And
Well, that's related.
yeah, it is. Shit.
Mhm.
I got off topic.
We can go to FBI.
Okay, since we're talking about this social issue thing, Michael Tracy brought up a really great point. The Republicans were not able to stop the Inflation Reduction Act, 50-50 plus a 1-vote split from Harris to pass the Inflation Reduction Act in the Senate.
Mhm.
And we've talked about this before. It's basically the Green New Deal repackaged as a pork barrel spending bill. And so when the Democrats and Occupy Wall Street happened, they got distracted. Some conspiracy theorists would say intentionally subverted and distracted by identity politics and social issues away from economics, the big split in the left. You're either an economic leftist or you're an identity leftist, and we can't, as far as just pure energy and accomplishing stuff, if you want to get something done, you need full force on one or the other. It seems like the Republicans have also fallen into the same trap of being distracted by social issues and losing sight of the bigger economic issues that actually affect their constituents.
Mm-hmm. It's exactly what I was thinking about the right wing in the last 6 to 9 months. So the right wing was doing great for a long time. From my perspective and from their own perspective, they were doing great. They got Trump in the White House, and then when Trump got screwed, they built a whole movement to get him back into the White House, which is, as I said, it's the biggest social movement in my lifetime. Biggest politically rebellious movement in my lifetime. And we're making tremendous critiques of the regime, of the Democratic Party, of the Republican Party, of American politics generally, of American foreign policy. They were making just devastating, long overdue critiques that I hadn't heard, that I'd wanted to hear for my whole life. And finally, I'm hearing this stuff being voiced by national political people. And then all of a sudden, they got hooked on the pedophiles and started talking about grooming, and everybody's a groomer and everybody's a pedophile. And then they lost me, but they certainly lost a whole lot of people who were somewhat sympathetic, who came from a place like me, sort of a formerly left, formerly liberal, whatever, bi-coastal, cosmopolitan, et cetera, et cetera. We look at that stuff and it's just like, okay, these people are completely out of their minds. And it's just, and it's also just, what exactly are they going to do about pedophiles that hasn't been done already? We have 1 million people on the sex offender registry. If you get caught as a pedophile, you go to prison for a very long time. And when you're in prison, you're likely to get killed by the other prisoners. It's not like we don't punish pedophiles severely. We do. What exactly are they going to change about that? What is the program for grooming?
Mm-hmm.
What's the policy directive for grooming by the Republican Party? This issue that they're so concerned about. What do they want to do? Have they said? They haven't said, have they?
Yeah. Well, another thing is, I think this stuff is allowed to perpetuate in our discourse. I think the powers that be actually like this distraction going out there, because it puzzled me for a long time how the Jeffrey Epstein story got so much traction, because that was a super underground story. Only the craziest Alex Jones QAnon people knew about it and were ringing the bell about it until he got arrested and it became acceptable to talk about somehow. But the big piece of the Epstein story is not the pedophilia, and I'm not trying to minimize any victims here, but the real story with Epstein is the blackmail. And that's completely swept under the rug and ignored. That our politicians are compromised in a system of blackmail by some people who have connections to intelligence agencies. We don't know, is policy being done through this? Like, that's the bigger story, in my opinion, than the mechanism of blackmail.
So I haven't confirmed this, and you can easily check this, but I heard from Robert Barnes that the magistrate who authorized the search warrant on Mar-a-Lago formerly worked for Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, yeah, that judge, yeah.
And so the conspiracy theory now is that he did this to stop Trump or whoever from using that information. Using information from, I don't know. about Jeffrey Epstein against his opponents. Again, who knows? But that's sort of the Robert Barnes is about the smartest political analyst out there these days, I think, by the way. Everyone should go check him out. Viva Fry, or was it called Barnes Law? Viva Fry, Barnes Law. Anyway, Robert Barnes. So that could be, there's a whole lot of very incriminating information floating around out there on all sorts of very powerful people, from the Clintons to Bill Gates to Donald Trump himself. And sure, I mean, a lot of people have an interest in keeping that quiet and ruining and destroying that information, destroying the sources of it. So that could be what's going on. That kind of stuff, compromat, I think it might be underplayed, actually. I heard a rumor about Jeff Bezos, that Jeff Bezos has a lot of dick pics that are in the possession of the Chinese government, and that they've used the dick pics to basically force him into signing very, very favorable deals for the CCP. Who knows? Although that's from a pretty good source, but it's certainly plausible. I mean, we know that at least one major politician, Anthony Weiner, sent out dick pics all over the place, and in fact got destroyed by them. Men have a tendency to do that thing. It's hard. A lot of men have a hard time controlling themselves, and it's so funny, like that. These very powerful, very smart, accomplished men, they get taken down by these just almost juvenile moments of lack of self-control. Like they just over a woman. It's amazing. They'll build this whole career. They'll work all day, every day for decades, building themselves into this powerful creature. And then they'll send a picture of their penis to some chick in Salt Lake City who's 19 years old and works at a bar. And then their career's over. It's all over. Like Anthony Weiner. It's really remarkable. But I think there's got to be a lot of that, especially nowadays with cameras, and everybody's got a camera and everybody's got access to the internet, and everybody, I'm sure dick pics are more popular than ever. and things like that. So it's easy. Sexual blackmail has become much, much easier to carry out.
Before the sexual revolution, and when we were more repressed about sex, and not even that long ago, if you were just cheating on your wife, that's a career ender, right?
Oh yeah.
But or if you're homosexual, that's a career ender. That's right. The FBI did that a ton. J. Edgar Hoover was big on that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Even though he was gay himself.
Yeah. He was a crossdresser. Yeah.
And a crossdresser. He was very gay. Oh yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. So you got to get people with producing actual pornography. It has to be another level. Like just cheating on your wife won't get you kicked out anymore.
So yeah, the story with Epstein was he got 16, 17-year-old girls from a Victoria's Secret model recruiter, or Ghislaine would find them, and the idea was you trick the politicians, say, hey, come to my island mansion, and let's just party. And you assume the girls are 18, 19, 20. And then you have the blackmail on them saying, I know what you did. You better fall in line. And people miss that detail of the story and think that all these politicians are just willing pedophiles, when they were acting under the assumption that they weren't potentially in this blackmail situation. They were entrapped, and that's what's really going on.
Right. Right. Of course. I mean, they're not that stupid. They would not do that if they knew that the girls were underage. I mean, no one is that stupid. I mean, men lack control, certainly, as I said, in sexual relations, but not to that degree.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not only a career ender, that's a potential life ender if you get caught doing that. So I think that's true. That makes sense to me that they were entrapped in that way.
And with the Alex Jones story, for example, Alex Jones, the defamation trial, it was the Democrats who amplified the worst Sandy Hook conspiracy theories to make it sound like that's the whole case of Sandy Hook skepticism. Yeah, they were the ones who constantly repeat crisis actor, crisis actor, crisis actor. Alex Jones said nobody died, when, Alex Jones had much more nuanced points, had people on who made much more nuanced points. But, the mainstream media paints it all with this broad brush of crazy, which actually creates a feedback loop that amplifies the crazy.
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, clips out of context is how politics operates now. I mean, this is the way we talk about politics, is by looking at video clips that are taken out of context.
Yeah.
Again and again and again on every side, by the way, on both sides. I mean, I see it all the time on both sides. I just saw a couple clips just today or yesterday that were like, one was a right-wing one was a left-wing one, and they were both completely taken out of context and totally unfair to the subject.
Yeah. The new strategy is they don't even just like with Trump, T******. There's like this idea that even reprinting any of the words or showing a picture of the person might get somebody to check out that source and radicalize them on their own. That they don't even take quotes out of context. They paraphrase the person, and then you have to do your own digging to find out what it is that they're actually talking about. I found that so much with Alex Jones. Like, they didn't even.
Right. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad out there.
And going back to the clip of Corinne, the reason why I brought that clip up is I got deja vu. We talked about who's actually in charge, right? Because Biden's incompetent, Harris is incompetent, everybody seems to be incompetent. That we learned about this story along with you guys. I've heard that line so many times before. That was the line that Obama used verbatim when the Fast and Furious scandal kicked off. Yeah, I learned about these guns being smuggled just the same way as news reports. I had no idea this was happening. And with the IRS scandal. And I'm sure he's used it a couple more times, but that's an Obama line. We learned this from the news reports just along with you.
Yeah, so that's weird because he's the president, and I was pretty sure the buck stops there. I mean, Harry Truman said that pretty famously. And yeah, so I mean, if you have no control over the Department of Justice, then what's the point of having a president? What's the point of going out of our way to get you elected to be president if you can't stop the FBI from raiding people's houses? Yeah, no, it's an incredible cop-out. And Fast and Furious. Obama was amazingly slick at that. He could get away with murder because he was the opposite of Trump, because everyone gave him the benefit of the doubt because they trusted him and they thought he was a good man. And so, yeah, what's selling guns to the cartel? It's just a mistake. Well, yeah, so one of the guns was used to kill a U.S. officer. Nah, too bad. But isn't Barack a wonderful man? Unlike Donald Trump, because everything he does is evil. Yeah.
I was
all right.
One more thing about Alex Jones. I was Obama as a 12-year-old, as an 11, 12-year-old. I watched a ton of TV. I pretty much did what the TV told me to do. I was a little prescient on it, but like, TV told me Obama is the next Jesus. I gave him a chance even. The thing that turned me, and the thing that turned a lot of people, was the Alex Jones documentary in 2009, The Obama Deception. And he got KRS-One, Professor Griff, and all these black nationalists and rappers to explain how Obama is a CIA shill, just like the rest of them, and he's not pulling out of Iraq. He's actually expanding Iraq. And yeah, Alex Jones is very sophisticated for a long time, and people don't give him credit.
And I bet Alex Jones didn't even know what I taught in the history of the CIA class the other night, which is that actually all three of Obama's parents, his mother, his father, and his stepfather, all worked for the CIA throughout their careers. They worked for the CIA for CIA front organizations, on CIA projects from the 60s through the 90s, throughout their careers. Barack Obama, in fact, his parents met at the East West Center in Honolulu, which is a CIA front organization housed within the University of Hawaii, but it's known to be a CIA front organization. That's where they met, and that's where Barack Obama was born. He was literally born in a CIA house. He's a product of the CIA. Of course, he's going to abide by the dictates of the empire. And of course, he's going to carry out the mission of American imperialism. Of course.
Okay. Before Trump got raided, I wanted this whole show to be like a big CPAC retrospective, you know. What the hell happened at CPAC? Where are we? You know. Before I show any clips from CPAC, I want to ask: is there a Democrat, liberal equivalent of CPAC out there? Like,
right.
This is kind of a uniquely conservative spectacle.
Well, so I'll tell you what. For many years, in the 1980s and maybe even the early 90s, I would go every year to the Socialist Scholars Conference in New York City, the Socialist Scholars Conference, which had about 300 men with long beards and those black Malcolm X glasses, who never combed their hair, and they would wear clothes from like 20 years ago, and they would walk around grumbling about the class revolution and socialism and Marxism. And no, it was incredibly boring. The thing about CPAC is that it's unlike left-wing events. It's fun and entertaining consistently, regardless of your politics. If you're not entertained by CPAC, you're not interested in politics, and you're not interested in entertainment. The left wing, like at the Socialist Scholars Conference, has been notably earnest to be leftist, right? Because you are on the side of what is right and good and holy, and you are on the side of the poor people and the exploited, the oppressed, and the weak. It's a holy mission to be a leftist, and you know that you're right. And so there's no place for jokes. There's no place for jokes, because you are standing between the devil and all that is good. It is epic. Left-wing politics is epic. That's how they think of themselves, and that's how they think of the issues. And so there's no room for humor. And this is why college classrooms are so boring, and there's no humor in them, because it's all leftists teaching them pretty much. And this is why leftist events are like that too. My God, go to like a DSA convention or something. It just drone, again, regardless of your politics, if you agree with them totally, it's just a snooze fest. And I guess it's because the right wing has been the minority, and now it is being actively purged from society. So they are the outsiders, and outsiders, of course, are always the funniest. That's why Jews and blacks have been the funniest people in terms of who's produced comedians, stand-up comedians, right? Per capita, it's mostly Jews and blacks. And some sort of Catholics too, who also have always been outsiders as well. I guess that's why they're funnier and more entertaining, but they certainly are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also the intellectual diversity of CPAC.
Yeah.
You got libertarians, you've got neocons, you've got MAGA. Yeah, you've got, and even just watching, when the presidential election comes along, the debates, the Republican primaries are way more entertaining than the Democratic primaries always. There's way less conformity and way more just actual exchange of ideas happening.
Yeah. Right. Oh, I know. Fox News, for all its massive faults, we know that it's been documented. There have been studies that show this very clearly. It's far more diverse intellectually and politically than MSNBC or CNN. MSNBC stopped having conservatives on years ago. I mean, they just have liberals and leftists on now. They don't even have a lot of leftists on. Like Glenn Greenwald has been banned from MSNBC for a long time. A lot of Marxist types, a lot of socialist hard leftists, a lot of Bernie types are not allowed on CNN or MSNBC. It's just the Democratic Party that they're working for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know exactly why Fox is so diverse and so open to different ideas and different points of view, but they certainly are. I mean, the fact that Glenn Greenwald is on Tucker Carlson all the time speaks volumes to their commitment to, I guess, curiosity. But I don't know why, actually. I need a better explanation for why Fox is more open to diverse points of view.
I think it's good business. And I think that's part of it. They know that they can reach more people if, like Fox completely outranks in terms of ratings every other news station combined on cable. And they know that their opinion, like they put the propaganda out in the straight ahead news. Like Fox and Friends is actually pretty establishment. And
Mm-hmm.
the news is the propaganda, and the opinions are diverse, and they're one person's opinion, or they're a team of writers' opinions. So yeah, Kennedy's more mainline libertarian. Tucker is, the cutting edge of MAGA. Yeah, and Hannity is old school Republican, Trumper kind of. And yeah, but it's opinion, and they know that the personality is what sells, not the propaganda.
Yeah. I mean, they're the only major outlet that is not left liberal.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they also, and that's why they're so large, I guess. And I guess it also gives them room to experiment, I suppose, and to be a little looser.
Mm-hmm.
They're not quite as buttoned down as tight as the left wing, the liberal media is. Yeah, it's a good thing though. I mean, I was on Fox a lot back in the day when I was still doing cable news, before I realized how useless it was to do cable news. But yeah, I was on a regular basis. They would fly me out. Stossel was on Red Eye with Greg Gutfeld. Yeah, I was on a couple of other shows too on Fox. I was in that building quite a bit. I was never once invited to CNN or MSNBC. They didn't even consider me. Forget it.
You were the wacky liberal professor at when you were on Fox. Yeah,
I was on Hannity. So Sean Hannity wanted to make me the regular liberal guest on his radio show, and he had me on twice on his radio show. And they told me that they wanted me to be the regular liberal, and I was like, I'm not a liberal. And he kept assuming I was a liberal. He's like, well, because you're a liberal professor, you think this. I was like, no, actually, Sean, I think something very different. He had no idea. Of course, my politics is like neither here nor there, right? So he had no idea what to do with me.
Damn,
they got rid of me.
You could have been the Alan Colmes. You could have filled in for Alan Colmes.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And I was on Laura Ingraham too on a radio show, and she yelled at me for 30 minutes. Just yelled. Yeah, I was on the phone too, and she just was. I had to actually hold it like this. Laura Ingraham was just like yelling at me about like rap lyrics. It was about rap lyrics and how she needed me to say how terrible they were. If you had a daughter, would you be okay with her listening to this, Professor Russell? Just yelling.
You're the one reading them right now, so you must be okay with them. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
I know. The good old culture wars when they used to care about rap lyrics. Now no one cares about that anymore. Now they care about gay school teachers.
Yeah, the war on rap has already been lost, and now, dude,
right.
Rappers are right wing now.
Well, rap defeated itself, in my view.
Fair enough.
The genre is dead, I think.
Okay, I'm gonna stick on the FBI because we didn't really go over how the battle lines are being drawn. That the Republicans are staunchly against the FBI now, and this was before the raid, but this is Representative Andy Biggs basically saying defund the federal police, and this was at CPAC.
Wow.
Back of the government. And we don't have control of the government right now. We sit there, I'm in a minority of the minority. We have to get the House back, we have to get the Senate back. And then we have to bring them in, and there are things you can do. You can do the Holman Rule. And that's what you do is you start defunding some of these bad agencies, the FBI, the DOJ. You use the Holman Rule to defund people who have abused their power. You bring impeachment articles against the judges who have violated due process rights in the federal statutes, for instance, on pretrial detention. I'm like Cash. I've gone through a lot of these files. I don't see any basis for pretrial detention.
Yeah, so the Republicans are anti-cop now, and the Democrats, whatever the FBI and DOJ does, good for them. The same people that killed Martin Luther King Jr., or at least spied on him, those are the people you trust with your decisions.
Yeah, we've seen a major flip on this. Yeah, that Republican was sounding a lot like communists 20 years ago. Communist civil liberties lawyers. The ACLU has stopped being interested in civil liberties. Yeah, so here's the story. Okay, so liberals and some leftists were free speech champions. They were the free speech champions from the 1920s until Trump. because they ran the place, because they were the dominant political force in American culture, because they controlled the deep state. They controlled politics generally. Republicans would make an appearance now and then, but always within a Democratic Party show. As I've said many times, all the major institutions of the American empire were created by Democrats, you know, from GATT to the UN to NATO. That was all Democratic Party, the Fed, right? There's all Democrats. And so it's easy to be for free speech when you are almighty and powerful. And until Trump, no one challenged the liberal hegemony. No one, not even rhetorically. No one even raised questions about whether we should have these institutions, whether we should have NATO, whether we should have a Fed, any of that stuff. Well, when Trump comes along, oh my God, there's a glitch in the matrix. We might actually go down at some point. There's actually a serious, powerful opposition to us, and it seems to be growing in strength. Well, that's when you get very nervous about free speech. So when you start cracking down on free speech, like every major dictator has done, that is nothing but an admission of vulnerability. They know that for the first time in a century, they can be defeated. And it's looking more and more like that. And so as you go down with your ship, the last thing you can do is try to stop people from talking. Mm-hmm. That's the last thing you try to do, is stop people from talking. It almost never works. It really never works. And so that's the good news, is that we know that because they're doing this, we know for that reason that they are in major trouble. But while they're going down, they can do a lot of damage. And then the worst part is that the Republicans who are about to replace them, the MAGA people who are about to replace them, are no fans of free speech either. And many of them want to put people. Am I still here? Did I get lost?
Yeah,
there?
You're here. You got a glitch, but you're here.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Yeah, so that's why they gave up on civil liberties and free speech, because they're not running the show anymore, or they're about to stop running the show.
Mm-hmm. Oh, another thing on Alex Jones with this. Alex Jones is going to be fine. They're blasting out. The media line on Alex Jones is he's forced to pay $50 million. We got him. He's got to have to pay so much that he can't set up shop anymore. Texas law for defamation and damages like that does not allow that kind of sum to be paid out. He's going to pay much less out. And even if he did have to go into debt and sell all of InfoWars' operation, he could set up a webcam anywhere and have an audience of millions. Like,
oh yeah,
you can't stop the message. And they're just trying to intimidate people into thinking that they can. Yep.
Can you hear the chicken?
There is faintly, but it's there. Yeah.
Okay. People might not know that I live with chickens. You know, I'm really perverted that way. Let me close my window here. Yeah, no, Jones. I mean, if you have an audience that big, if you have a fan base that big, you're going to be fine forever. He's uncancelable. 45 million, he can make that up, I think. No problem. Yeah. But what they've been doing to Trump and to Jones, Alex Jones, is the greatest assault on civil liberties in my lifetime. When you combine them. And I mean, not just Trump, but the whole MAGA movement, the framing of the MAGA movement, the January 6th, the way they framed Trump for all sorts of things, treason and on down, sometimes rape, sometimes murder even. This is, and then the raid, the FBI raid on an ex-president's house. I mean, for obviously political reasons, to try to stop him from running again. This is it. This is our last stand, or maybe it's their last stand. It's the last stand of the regime. And their final act is to destroy the Bill of Rights. Make it a dead letter. Now, the thing is, what they're doing is they are establishing precedent that is devastating to civil liberties by doing these things and getting away with them and having judges sign off on it and having the political establishment and the mainstream media sign off on it and say it's great. Well, then they're still going to lose because they're going to be replaced by Republicans and MAGA and Trump, who are then going to use those precedents to do what with, do you think? Like, if you're a gay school teacher and you love Joe Biden, good luck. The rules that were put in place under Biden will be used against you when the Republicans can use them.
Mhm.
This is like the oldest lesson in the book that the left refuses to learn.
Mhm.
That when you crack down on speech and civil liberties for dissidents, you can't be a dissident anymore. You're now part of the ruling class. So if you want to be a dissident, if you think you're going to be a dissident in the future, you better not support things like unwarranted raids on houses and censoring speech through social media, etc.
Well, Trump didn't learn this lesson either. When he was going after Hillary during the whole email scandal, lock her up, all that, he put in place certain precedents that led to this particular raid on Mar-a-Lago. Like he put in protections for, should this happen again, and a candidate or somebody is accused of having classified documents that, they can be raided. And Trump appointed Christopher Wray, and all this is biting himself in the ass because he gave the FBI the same power that is used against him, and everybody forgets this. And this conversation was happening when Obama was signing all of his executive powers and the end of his term presidency, and Democrats had no idea that Trump could have these powers.
Yeah, right. The MAGA position on the social media companies is to make them into a public utility. That is the worst idea possible. So, and a lot of leftists want that too. I'm like, yeah, so that all depends on who controls the public utility. Duh. It depends on who runs Congress and who has the presidency. The idea that the government will be determining, the government of the time will be determining what is allowed on Twitter is the worst idea for political dissidents possible. I mean, that is, but yeah, they both agree. That's the thing. That's the problem. They agree that language, that political speech should be limited. They just think different speech should be limited, but political speech should be.
So, yeah, along these lines, this prisoner exhibit got lampooned over Twitter at CPAC, and it was seen as campy. But this is what they had set up. It was a silent DJ booth. So you had testimony from the political prisoners for the January 6th arrests. And then you had an actor who was just seen moping around in a fake prison cell. And it was supposed to symbolize everything going on. So this was that at CPAC.
So here we go. Okay. Classic example. This is very typical. J6th, to me and to many people, is an atrocity. What's happening? These are political prisoners. Habeas corpus apparently has been suspended. They've been held in solitary confinement, many of them without a trial. Now, for how long is it? Year and a half. Mm-hmm. It's grotesque. And the entire left wing should be protesting this because this is what used to happen to the left. And this is what happens to the left in other countries. They get locked in prison for a very long time simply for being politically aberrant. So it's a very noble cause here, I think. I am completely in solidarity with the supporters of the January 6th defendants. What happens, though, is the right wing just doesn't have very good taste and very poor communication skills. So they're very good at communicating with the people who already are with them on this, but it's just so cheesy and melodramatic and over the top and silly looking, and it kind of trivializes, I think, J6. If I were in lockup in DC as one of those men, I don't think I'd want to see this. I wouldn't want to be portrayed this way. It's also making them into victims, which they are. But again, the right wing, I thought, was against victimhood and against the politics of victimhood. But that's exactly what they're playing. They're trying to elicit sympathy for these men for being in prison. I don't care that they're in prison. I care that they're in prison for political reasons. So let's talk about the political reasons instead of making a show of it.
Yeah. Habeas corpus is huge. Not a lot of people even know what it is, but it's one of the rights that's actually in the Constitution before the Bill of Rights. It's kind of more important than the Bill of Rights in that it's a huge tradition that you should be tried with a crime before you're put in jail, you know? And this used to be what the ACLU was all about, right? This used to be what the left wing was all about. And Obama campaigned on restoring habeas corpus after Bush got rid of it during the Patriot Act and all that. And then the NDAA in 2012, I think, Obama suspended habeas corpus, and it's been renewed as a suspension to this day. One of the most fundamental rights doesn't exist anymore in this country.
Yep. So the first person to suspend habeas corpus in this country on a grand scale was the original progressive, Abraham Lincoln, 1861. He was like, yeah, we don't need that. We're going to lock up all the Confederates and all the people we suspect of being Confederates, and we're just going to leave them there. They don't need a trial. They're just going to stay there until they're going to stay in jail until the war's over. No trial, no nothing. Yeah, on a mass scale, thousands and thousands of people were locked up for having bad political beliefs and kept in jail without a trial under Abraham Lincoln. And then that happened again under who? The next big progressive, Woodrow Wilson. World War I, same thing. Oh, and then again, when? Oh, World War II, under the next big progressive, Franklin Roosevelt, locked up thousands of people for opposing the war or simply for opposing the government. This is a left-wing tradition.
Yeah.
Habeas corpus is their enemy. They don't like habeas corpus. They like to lock up their political enemies. That seems pretty clear.
Totally. And you know what? It is a fair attack that the Democrats made that, you know what, we should be above melodramatic demonstrations of political theater. You know, that's just something that, you know, when they go low, we go high. And yeah, if anybody remembers this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about melodrama.
Yeah. But you're right. Yeah, this is the Republicans should be above this. They should know that that's what they do. We don't do these kinds of demonstrations, but it I don't know. It's kind of endearing. Like the guy in the cell kind of elicits the same emotion as like a cheesy school play or something. Like,
well, I think it resonates with Christianity. I think there's a lot of. I think if you're Christian, raised a Christian, you know, you're probably raised with the idea of Christ as having been the original victim, and that's how he's portrayed often. You know, less of a martyr and actually more of a victim. You know, and Mel Gibson's movie was very much that. You know, he was a victim. I mean, that's why he showed the brutality in such exquisite detail of the crucifixion, because we need to feel that sympathy for Christ. And so the J6 prisoner in that little skit at CPAC, he's a Christ figure. That's what I was reminded of when I saw it. And so it makes sense to me that people on the right, especially the Christian right, which I think is prominent at CPAC, would dig that. Resonates with their Bible studies.
Yeah. I get a church play vibe from it very much. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. Church play. Yeah.
You know what? I was going to ask, did you want to do Unregistered live after this? Do you want to go on Zoom now, or the email never got out?
Yeah. So in 5 minutes, we're going to go over to Unregistered live. If you are a member of Patreon, if you're a patron of Unregistered, we will post the link in 5 minutes. It'll be on there in 5 minutes. So go there. If you're not a patron and you would like to hang out with us after this show at Unregistered Live, which is just us hanging out on Zoom, go to patreon.com/unregistered and become a patron at any level, and we'll see you there. So that again, in 5 minutes, go to Patreon if you're a member, if you're a patron, and the link will be there. If you're not a patron, go join up and you'll see the link.
Sweet. I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm going to have Steve Bannon's speech play us out.
Awesome.
At
My
CPAC.
man.
Yeah, what he said.
Fiery.
Yeah, very fiery. And I think it's vindication for the Ron Paul people, vindication for the Tho bishops out there in the world who tried to push certain elements of the right wing towards economic libertarianism. I think you guys have actually accomplished a lot by pointing stuff out in the discourse and getting your message out there. So
nice.
Yeah,
good for them.
This was Steve Bannon concluding his speech at CPAC.
Awesome.
See you soon.
Thank you.
One last thing. The biggest scam they have, the biggest con, is not just the appropriations process and how they fund it. It's the Federal Reserve. Okay? 0.5% of the citizens of this country own more assets than the bottom 90%. That's all happened over the last 10 years since 2008. We took a monetary base of back in the 80s of $800 billion. The balance sheet of the Fed was $880 billion under President Bush, right? Balance sheet of the Fed is $9.5 trillion today. The debt's $30 trillion. We have $100 to $150 trillion of contingent liabilities. All just because we're the prime reserve currency. The greatest export we have is the dollar. But all of that rests on the shoulders of our children and our grandchildren. Those are all due bills that are come due. All we've done is we've just cranked everything up. That's why they're talking about these ridiculous, insane bills of trillions of dollars, because the Federal Reserve will print the money. The Federal Reserve, by the way, that's owned not by the American people, a central bank that's owned by 24 prime brokers, being J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. Now, how does that work? And governors that kind of selected, but 12 years. And the best governor we've had in the Federal Reserve right here in Dallas, Richard Fisher, who told you what was going to happen by going to negative interest rates, told you what was going to happen by printing all this money and having $4, $5, $6 trillion, $7 trillion, $8 trillion, now $9 trillion on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. It's going to cause, you talk inequality, it's not a $15 minimum wage, that's tip money. We have, I think M2 today is 22 or $23 trillion. That's how the administrative state pays for itself. We don't need to audit the Fed. We need to end the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has usurped its power and the power of the American people and our elected representatives. And no, they do not have the consent of the governed. We will not comply. We will not submit, and it must be ended. In closing, let me just remind you, from the founding of this nation up to the founding of the Federal Reserve, for those 100 years, Hamilton versus Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, Henry Clay, Teddy Roosevelt, William Jennings Bryan, the whole concept of 19th century is almost entirely the politics of money. It was actively debated what the currency was. Who controlled the currency? What was a central bank? Who controlled the central bank? After the Federal Reserve was formed, we've lost that. That is going to be one of the, if not the most major issue we have. We have to end the Federal Reserve. We have to turn it back. That central bank is going to be owned by one group. You know what that group is? The American people. The American people. Not a bunch of fat cat prime brokers on Wall Street. Not guys not third-tier bankers from fifth-tier firms like Powell. You're going to have the American people control their own bank and their own currency.